Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa man wala. Welcome back to Priming the Primer here on my YouTube page as well as on the Swiss page. The Swiss page, of course, you have access to a lot more things. I would encourage people to enroll at our school at suhailbab.com. Make dua for us, and then if you can subscribe, share on social media, encourage people to take part in this process, it will be much appreciated. Now let's talk about practical applications of Islamic legal rulings. How do we apply this to our lives? So, for example, salah is wajib. The 5 daily prayers are obligatory upon every Muslim, eligible Muslim. Performing wudu before prayer is also required for its validity. So there's a reward for doing, a punishment for abandoning. Mandub is using miswak or a toothbrush, right, before prayer. It's recommended practice from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but not obligatory. So rewarding for doing, no punishment for abandoning. Food choices is going to fall under mubah, at-ta'am, choosing between different types of permissible halal food is left to personal preference with neither reward nor punishment attached. So there's no reward, no punishment there. Makruh al-israf, excessive wasting water. And that could change depending on the situation, could be haram. But as a default, we say makruh, using excessive water during wudu beyond what is needed is discouraged, but does not invalidate the wudu. So no punishment, but there's a reward for abandoning. Mahdhur, the prohibited, example is alcohol. Consuming alcohol is prohibited in Islam. The prohibition extends to selling, buying, or serving alcoholic beverages. What you could take from that is there's a lot of things around the haram that ensure compliancy, not just the actual haram act, but what may trigger it or cause it also becomes haram. That's the discussion we'll have in the future, but pay attention to that. Same thing can apply to the obligations. What leads to an obligation can become obligatory. What leads to the impermissible can become forbidden. Sahih, a marriage contract with all the required elements, the witnesses, the wali, is valid. Without these elements, it is invalid and produces no legal effects. The opposite would be, of course, sahih and batil. They're going to run opposite to one another. So here's a case study for application, in this hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about how the Prophet made wudu, goes into great detail. Elements of wudu required from this hadith, right? Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan said that the Prophet when he would make wudu, he would put his hands in a jar of water and he would wash them 3 times. Then he would put his right hand in the wudu. Wudu is the jar. Not wudu is the act, okay? With fatha, wudu is the jar. Wu is the act. ثُمَّ تَمَضْمَضَ وَاسْتَنْشَقَ وَاسْتَنْثَرَ. And then he would blow water in his nose and his mouth. Then he would wash his face 3 times. Then his hands to the elbows 3 times. Then he would wipe his face and he would wipe his head, and then he would wash his feet 3 times. What do we understand from this is the obligation to wash the face, the hands to elbows, wiping head, washing feet. What's recommended from the hadith, washing each 3 times. We understand it's a long discussion that once is sufficient. Using miswak is also recommended. What's the outcome? That if we do this according to specifically, you look at the 6th verse of the 5th chapter of the Quran, that our prayer is valid because our wudu is valid, our prayer will be invalid if our wudu is invalid. And here's that verse right here. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق. O you who believe, when you rise to pray, actually it means when you rise to pray, wash your faces and your hands to the elbows. We understand this to be fard. We have to wash our face, we have to wash our hands, have to wash also, the verse continues, فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. That we have to wash, the verse says, wash your face only once, wash your arms to the hands to the elbows or above the elbows only once, wipe your head once, and wash your feet. So we understand the verse is giving us the fard. Here Sayyidina Uthman's hadith is saying 3 times. When we bring that in congregation with the verse, we understand, the 2nd and 3rd time is recommended. The fard is once. And the other things mentioned in the hadith, which are not found in the ayah, imply recommendation, not obligation. So here, washing the face, hands to the elbows, washing the head, washing the feet, found in the verse as commands to do, definitive commands to do. Then we understand what's recommended, washing each part 3 times, using miswak, and all that. This first one leads to the validity of the prayer. What are some contemporary applications of Islamic rulings, like digital finance? Is it free from interest? If it's not, modern banking apps and digital payment systems must adhere to Islamic principles. Like if it's not free of interest, then it's mahdur. There must be a full disclosure of terms. That's wajib. Clear intention and agreement in the contract. That's sahih. Environmental stewardship. Islamic rulings apply to modern environmental challenges, not polluting shared resources. That's wajib. It's not allowed to do that. Recycling and conservation actually is mandub. Wanton destruction of ecosystems is mahdhur. Scholarly differences in categorizing legal rulings. There's some different categorizations we can think about. We're going to go through this quickly, but we addressed it earlier, just to look at it one more time. So the 5 categories we're familiar with. How do we expand those classifications? Fard and wajib distinction. Some Hanafi scholars differentiate between a fard and a wajib through probable evidence. They say the fard is definitive evidence, the wajib is probable evidence. Learn about that in deeper books of usul al-fiqh. Haram, makruh, and tahrimi, similar distinctions between prohibitions. You find different terms established by definitive versus probable evidence. But remember, this difference in terminology within the Hanafi school and the other 3 schools. The other 3 schools are called mutakallimin. The Hanafis are called fuqaha, is largely rooted based on the strength of an evidence, the probability of an evidence, okay? Additional categories, some include ruqsa, a concession, and azima, a strict ruling, as separate categories, but most just lump them in. They may talk about them separately just to help you understand them. So, for example, a ruqsa is I can break my fast if I'm sick. The azima is if I'm not sick, I have to fast. There's also some divergent scholarly viewpoints on things like Sahih and Batil. Imam Haramain includes Sahih and Batil as distinct categories of legal rulings, making 7 total. And I said this to you earlier, that the majority of you consider Sahih and Batil as descriptive qualities that apply to actions after they are categorized as rulings. So Imam al-Haramain is employing them as separate rulings in this book, not in Burhan. The majority apply them as descriptive qualities, adjectives, of actions that are already been ruled on. The nature of mubah, we find a small difference between the Ash'ari and Mu'tazilites. This is in theology. Mubah is a legal ruling established by the lawgiver's declaration of permissibility. The Mu'tazilites say mubah refers to the absence of any legal demand and represents the original state of things before revelation. So the Ash'ari is saying there's a declaration of permissibility. Hanafis are saying the default is permissibility. Don't worry about that now, it'll come later on. Tazim al-hukm, graduation within categories. So within wajib, we have the individual obligations, we have communal obligations, and we have the emphasized, 4 kids and haven't had much sleep, emphasized obligations, mu'akkad. Within mandub, we have the sunnah mu'akkada, which is emphasized, the nawafil, which are encouraged, and then the fada'il, which are like encouraged but not to the same degree. The Malik used to talk about this in the concept of the sunnah. Wisdom behind differences. These scholarly differences reflect the richness of Islamic legal thought and provide flexibility in addressing complex issues. Each approach offers valuable perspectives for understanding divine guidance and its application, but you don't need to worry about all this stuff now, man. Honestly, don't worry about this. Imam al-Haramain doesn't do this. I added this for our students at Swiss. If you're watching this now, don't allow it to frustrate you. There's some assessments that I want you to think about. We have some quizzes on Swiss. They'll be like 30% of your total grade. That's for the whole course, not just this section. There's a 25% midterm. There's a 15% case study analysis, what you have to do, and then there's a final examination. What you want to think about now is a knowledge check. If you're watching, you want to be able to define what is a hukm shar'i according to Imam al-Haramain and explain how his approach how he approaches it differently than Ibn Hajib, and then how Ibn Hajib actually defines it, right? We want to think about comparative analysis, compare and contrast the concepts of wajib and mandub and the others. Case study, analyze the elements of wudu, mentioned the hadith of Uthman ibn Affan, and classify each action according to the appropriate legal ruling. I did it for you a little bit, I didn't give you all the answers. Application, examine a contemporary issues such as digital contracts, buying something on Amazon, selling something on TikTok Marketplace, or buying something on TikTok Marketplace, whatever, and explain how the concepts of sahih and valid apply in this context. Critical thinking, I want you to think about explaining the wisdom behind the graduation of Islamic legal rulings and how this demonstrates the balance between strictness and ease in Islamic law. Go back up real quick here and let me, oh man, that's too small. So what are the outcomes that you should be able to assess yourself with after this series? You should be able to accurately define and distinguish between the 7 categories of Islamic rulings. You have to, man. Students can classify various religious acts according to the appropriate legal categories. You have to be able to do that now. Students can explain the relationship between different categories of legal rulings. They can explain also and articulate the wisdom behind the step-by-step approach of Islamic legal rulings. Students can apply their understanding to some contemporary issues. I hear Bloom's taxonomy coming out here. It's my background was in education. Cool degree, man. No money in it, but a great degree. Here's some further resources you can look at. The Waraqat of Imam al-Juwayni is one. Al-Mustasfa of Imam al-Ghazali. Don't worry about that, book's hard. Don't worry about that now. Usul al-Fiqh of Muhammad Abu Zahra, if it's translated, good book to look at. Islamic Legal Theory of Imran Ahsan Khan Niazi is a great text and something to think about. These two over here are going to be like primary text. You don't need to worry about this. More for educators if you're teaching. I would add to this, I wouldn't necessarily use Al-Ghazali. I would use the Manhaj of Al-Baydawi. Okay. In English, Abu Zahra's book is great if it's available. Islamic Legal Theory of Sheikh Imran is great. Usul al-Fiqh, the course that we have, this course as well as the other one, and as well as the video series that you're looking at right now. What are some reading assignments? Review the chapter on Ijtihad and conditions in Imam al-Haramain's Waraqat. You don't have that right yet, but the translation is out there, but you don't have it with Hattab's commentary. What you want to think about, what's coming in the future, is what is the definition of ijtihad in Islamic legal theory? How does understanding legal rulings help in the process of ijtihad? What are the qualifications required for someone to engage in ijtihad? We're going to get to that later on. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you and bless you. Barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.